let me tell you about the NAR lawsuit. Do you know what that is? It's a case study in why, if you're a big organization, you need to get the correct amount of liability insurance.
For real.
And not only when I say correct amount, I mean read all the paragraphs, because do you know what happened to them? Their policy ran out of money to pay for the defense of the attorneys.
You're kidding.
I'm not kidding.
I didn't know that. I don't think anybody knows that.
They might not.
Wow.
And so they do this whole trial in Kansas City, they lose.
Yeah.
And, they got this big judgment. And so, okay, I need to appeal this one. They have another one in Illinois going on. And we got, what's this letter from our insurance company? Oh, we can't pay our attorneys anymore.
Wow.
And here we are at the settlement.
Yeah.
And speaking of yeah, exactly. And speaking of the settlement, here's another thing that no one's talking about. Oh boy, it's going to be like this forever.
Yeah.
Right, Mike?
Yeah.
No, for 7 years.
7 years. Yeah.
It expires in 7 years.
Yeah. We were discussing that when I first said it. So you came off and
Yeah.
like, hey, did you see this? I'm like,
We both got excited for.
yeah. And so in the proposed settlement, the changes that they're proposing expire 7 years after the settlement date. Right?
Yeah.
And so it will go back to the way it was, or some variation of that, or some other new way that is more, streamlined as far as capitalism and the consumer is concerned.
Oh yeah, I can think of lots of ways
Yeah.
that they could have done this and avoided the lawsuit. But here we are. We're in a proposed settlement now that's not final, but I'd be very surprised if it doesn't become finalized. Now, we should point out, before we get into the meat of it, the settlement applies to most, but there are some holdouts.
Yeah.
Okay. Berkshire Hathaway,
Yep.
they can read insurance contracts.
Yep.
Their attorneys are still getting paid. They're still fighting.
Yeah.
So what happens if they win? It might shake some things up, right?
Yeah. What would happen if they won?
Well, then they have a different standard, right?
Wow. So they wouldn't have to abide necessarily by the same terms of the settlement.
It's if they win, it was like nothing. I mean, the settlement applies to NAR.
In the other brokerages that they had under the umbrella.
Yes, the ones that are under the umbrella. There's some boutique brokerages that I couldn't find their names, but anybody that did $2 billion worth of residential,
Yeah, or less
or less.
was
Um,
covered.
well, if you did 2 billion or more, you're not in it. So all your agents will be covered under the settlement through NAR, but your actual brokerage, the business,
Might still have to fight.
yeah, you
So
might
maybe
be.
that's why Berkshire isn't settling,
It might be.
because it's not in their interest. Even if they did, uh, 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 you know, go with NAR, they might still have to face it as a brokerage.
And just spitboarding it. I mean, if they won, they might be at a very big advantage.
Wow, no doubt. And they got deep pockets because that's Warren Buffett, right?
Yeah,
So
he can read an insurance. Yeah, he owns an insurance
he
company.
owns multiple insurance companies. Yeah, right? Like these settlement amounts are probably, in his couch cushion. So there's that.
Right. So, maybe they get a different deal. You just never know.
Yeah.
But as to most, there's this proposed settlement. I would be very surprised if it doesn't go through. And what's the main thing that it does? There's only a couple main things that it does. The main one being it decouples the commissions
Right.
of the seller and the buyer.
To an extent. But, for me, I would still operate pretty much the same way I was. I would still offer a sub agent commission. I would still offer a buyer's agent commission. I would still list homes at the same percent that I did before. And, the difference being instead of the commission being in the MLS, it would just say in the special marks, seller agrees to pay blank percent towards buyer's prepaids and closing costs.
Oh, and yeah.
Everybody knows what that's code for, right? That's how you get paid.
And I wouldn't be surprised if there's third parties that make websites that list all
Oh,
this
you know,
stuff.
I've been very much. But the thing is, adoption on those type of things, and then also in the settlement, it did have very specific instructions about that. So NAR couldn't facilitate something like that had like a data feed right from the MLS that's still on a third party site of advertising commissions. Because I was like, well, what can we do here? Maybe we'll make something. But our portal, right? It's a nationwide MLS feed, does facilitate that, and so I don't want to rock the boat there. I did see another website company put something out the other day, and I just think that there's innovation there. But the main thing is it's going to have high adoption. It's going to have to be across the board for it to work. And I think that, there will be a clear winner as far as how we do that in the future.
Someone's going to fill the void.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, common sense prevails, right?
Yeah.
If you make it harder for somebody to buy your house, you are going to get less money,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
so, oh, now I'm only gonna, I'm not offering anything to a buyer's agent.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I hope you enjoy keeping your house.
Right. Well, yeah. Like always, the market prevails. Right.
Yeah,
Capitalism is efficient. And it's going to make sure that whatever rewards the interests of both parties is going to bubble up to the top and be the main thing. And I feel like the system that we had was really good to protect the buyer, to protect the seller. I think that a lot of these news articles with their like fantastic headlines, right? The required commission or the mandatory commission of 6% is no longer. Buyer agents will no longer charge 6%. I'm like, they never charge 6%. But if I'm an agent and I know that consumers are reading that garbage and they come to me like, hey, I heard that you're no longer charging 6% to represent me as a buyer, I'd be like, you're right. I only charge 4.
right. So yeah,
which is higher, right?
right.
Yeah.
It's
So at the end of the day, it's not good for the consumer. Is my point.
yeah, people can take advantage of it,
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see how that works out. And it just kind of seems like, yeah, what's the net end result? Maybe it makes people do a little more work that weren't, right. I
Yeah.
mean, because with the changes that they want and what it's going to mean, isn't it going to kind of make some of residential feel a little bit more commercial real
Yeah.
estate now? How like transit, where you negotiate everything per transaction.
Yeah.
It could happen that way, right?
Yeah. Well, I think the main behavior change for the consumer and the agent is this requirement to get something signed up front prior to signing a home, to showing a home.
Right. The second thing where you have to now, if you show a home, get the person that's going to show the home to sign off on some sort of buyer's agency.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be buyer's agent. It could be sub agent. It just has to be hammered out before you open the door. And I think that for competent agents, that's going to be a huge benefit. And the reason why is like for me, what I did is every single customer that came in, right? We had massive lead generation, ISAs calling the leads, setting the appointment for them to come and meet us at our office, and then we would give them a presentation and sign the buyer's agency right there. Where that's going to be tough for agents is if they're trying to do it at the end of the process when the customer just wants to open the door, right? What do you mean I got to sign something to open the door? Hey, listen, this is the change in the business, And so for hundreds of years, it's been the other way. It's going to be interesting to see how the consumer reacts to the agent that's unprepared.
Yeah. And so I make my point for me. Yeah. I think some of these agents are going to have to work a little bit harder, and that's a good thing.
It is a good thing, and I think for the industry in general, a lot of agents were scared to get a buyer's agency signed, right? Like I said, I think there's still that thought, like, why would anybody ever sign up just to buy with me? And so I think that they're going to have to, get over that. I mean, they're going to have to get over that, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's no question. Yeah,
I mean, all kinds of ways that you can go. It's be like test driving a car almost.
Yeah.
You might have them sign something for just one showing.
yeah,
You know,
exactly,
let's just test you out and see how you do. So then you better do good,
right.
and that's good for the.
It is, and I think as far as the compensation structure, fundamentally, it shouldn't shift much. I know their goal is to make it negotiable, but I think that they're overestimating the general consumer's desire to focus on that little minor part of their transaction. At the end of the day, they want to get the right home for the best price, and they're not focused on letting that little part in the middle like get in the way of that necessarily.
Yeah, and I've even heard. I don't know if you've heard this, but there's a whole train of thought that you know commission versus concession. Now we're just going to hide it all in the concessions.
Yeah. Well, we actually just had a mandate where all of the commissions were to be displayed on every IDX feed. So there was more transparency than ever before in the industry, right? Never before could my customer go on a national portal and look to see what I was getting paid. They would have to ask for see it on the settlement statement if they, were the buyer side. And I feel like we went backwards in that regard for the consumer because now there is no transparency.
Which is so crazy because that's what they were aiming for is more less hidden things. And as you go through the settlement itself, I mean, it touches on all kinds of stuff. It's, trying to eliminate kickbacks and trying to, the things that,
What do you mean kickbacks?
oh, somebody saying, oh, I'm working for free for you, but really they're getting paid.
Yeah,
And
I
so,
would say the best part is all of our fees are paid by the seller.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, and it outlines some of that in here, and some of it should have happened, and some of it's good, but I think some of it is just happening because ran out of
Right out of money.
defense money.
Man, that's a really impactful piece of information
Yeah,
that I haven't seen anywhere.
no,
I did not know that was the case because a lot of agents are like, "Hey, NAR threw us under the bus, and we hate NAR. We should get away from NAR." But NAR is one of the biggest lobbying, arms in the country, and they're the reason why we get the tax write-off for our interest on our personal home. They're the reason why we get to pay no tax on a primary residence, that we've lived in for 2 years or more. It's all these things that the NRR has done to advocate for home ownership.
well, it's the history lesson.
Right.
It's why Daniel Plainview isn't ripping you the Sundays off to get their oil.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it was right after that time. It was around, was it 1903 or 13 is when it started.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah,
I had no idea when that started. Like I've never looked into
yeah, it's that old.
Yeah. Well, I know that real estate industry in general is like a couple hundred years old, right? As far as real estate being represented by, an agent to sell it. And this industry is been around for that long.
Yeah, it's just used to be a lot more rare,
A lot more Wild Westish, it sounds like, too.
literally.
Yeah. And, it pains my heart when I see these agents like knocking the NAR, like we should all stop paying the NAR. When I went through the recession, I had the mortgage company and of course the brokerage, and the mortgage side did not have that kind of organization to protect it. And so the things that came out of that were just really onerous, right? So like now all of a sudden these loan officers have to get licensed. These loan officers have to have a certain credit score in order to be licensed, which most of them didn't have the proper credit score. And then the things that they had to remember were like like something out of a government handbook. They were all these acronyms that really didn't make sense, and that's how you had to pass the test. And they put all of the onus on the mortgage broker when really it was the big banks that were out there making these offers to the loan officer of high compensation to put people in these subprime loans. So if you have a borrower that was like on the fence, right, they could either be in prime or subprime. Prime was paying 2 points on the back, but subprime was paying five. Right? It's behavior compensation alignment. So whose fault is it? Well, it's the bank for offering that and trying to get those type of loans. But when the rubber hit, the ground, it was all on the loan officer side because they didn't have an organization to advocate for them like the NAR.
Well, and eventually it was all on the public when the
100%.
when the mortgage-backed securities all failed,
Yeah,
right?
that's true because that's who our tax dollars bailed them on.
Banks were getting rich, mortgage brokers were getting rich.
And the LOs held the bag. I mean, like
Yeah, we all
they was bad guys.
footed the bill.
Yeah. So from an industry perspective, to me, like NAR is what keeps the wolf out of the henhouse, right? So like when big banks come in, which they did in the 80s, they tried to, infiltrate the real estate space, and NAR kept them out. When Wall Street comes in, and tries to upend the real estate space, like the travel side of the business, travel agencies rather, when they were able to move them out and move it all online, like the NAR is the one thing standing in the gap for us, and keeping us as a legitimate agency, or a legitimate industry. Uh, uh, um, they're the ones who keep us on track and keep us, above board with the public. And I just, again, I hate how I see everybody just throwing all this hate on NAR. And I feel like they should have some empathy. I mean, for crying out loud, that's a lot of money in defense.
Well, and if you do the history lesson, I mean, big bad NAR and these commissions like that, I mean, the reason why it's like that is because there was lawsuits.
Right.
And here we are coming full circle,
Yeah.
making a lawsuit to eliminate it. How about that?
And what'll happen is probably full circle again, another lawsuit, because I feel like in this kind of scenario, if an agent isn't prepared, they're just gonna say, "Here, sign this. I'll be a sub agent." They probably won't take the time to explain. I feel like there probably will be a lot less representation for buyers. Which
Yeah,
opens
well,
up-
my read of it is that if you're going to take a buyer out, you have to have some sort of buyer's agreement, which of course in states with dual agency, you're fine, but there's states where it's not going to work too.
Does it mean that it has to be a buyer's agency?
That's
to open the door?
that's my read of it. Yeah.
That's news to me too. I hadn't heard that. I thought you could still be a sub-agent of the seller and have that agency relationship disclosed and agreed
The
to.
way it reads, you got to have a buyer agency agreement to go show the
Wow.
buyer
Really?
the seller or dual, right?
Okay.
Because then it's and that works here in
Yeah.
our state.
Yeah, we have dual agency.
But and that's hard, really.
What about? Go ahead.
I mean, if you sit down and think about it, to be a true neutral dual agent,
Yeah, it's not really very likely.
right?
At that point, I think you're looking out for your interests.
Right. So I mean, I guess consider that a loophole for some states, but in some states, I think you know you can be like, hey, you know, I represent the seller, and you know, I can't be a buyer's agent on this one, but I'll be buyer's agent on some other houses.
So we also practice in Missouri transaction brokerage. What
Oh, right.
what would be the how would that work if I just
Well,
want to be a transaction broker and show the house?
well, in that if so, if I'm understanding your question right, that's where you put it out there, and you know somebody's going to come and they get the whole commission, right?
Well, a transaction broker means that I'm just facilitating the transaction. I don't have a fiduciary duty necessarily to either party, is my understanding. And so to open a door, I have to be a buyer's agent. I can't be a transaction broker.
Correct.
I can't be a sub agent of the seller.
Correct. That's my read of it.
Well, that's phenomenal. I mean, what when buyer's agency first became prevalent, there would be different commissions paid for different representation in the MLS. So smart agents started to figure out that if a buyer's agent represented the buyer, that they had less liability, right? So they would pay out 2% to her, two apples, right? to a sub agent, and they pay a higher percentage out to a buyer's agent. And so when you were looking at the MLS and you were going to show that property, you had to decide which one you were going to be when you wrote the contract up. And obviously, it was incentivized for you to represent the buyer and take some of that liability off the seller. Um,
You know, I would sit here, I think of loopholes all day, right? So I'm just trying to think. So all realtors working with the buyer have to enter into a written agreement before the buyer tours any home if that realtor will receive compensation from any source. The agreement must specify and conspicuously disclose the amount or rate of compensation and how this amount will be determined, and must be ascertainable versus open-ended. Such realtor may not receive compensation from any source that exceeds the agreement with the buyer, and it can't say free service if unless they'll be receiving comp from zero services. So if I'm a sub agent, how do I do that?